You're listening to episode 233 of the Comics Pals. We're a group of comic book journalists and friends who record a podcast together because we don't talk enough about comics in our daily lives.
Here's the thing that over the past 5 years, we've had to sit here and learn as a group of sometimes five friends who, have been doing this together for so long. Sometimes, we learned this with Pete, with Invincible. You just have to let one of us have a thing. Mm-hmm. And today, it's got to be Marco's.
Oh, what? Why? Is
Ron
it?
V. Ron V is here.
Nuh-uh.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. We are lucky enough, and Marco may not even survive this experience. Hopefully he can, because we are joined today by one of the biggest, brightest rising stars in all of comics, an absolute breath of fresh air in the industry. We're talking about the writer of These Savage Shores. We're talking about the writer of Catwoman. We're talking about the writer of a little small book called The Swamp Thing. We're talking about Ron V. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to surprise Marco, apparently.
And let me tell you, I'm shocked. Outside of setting up everything else, I'm shocked. I'm going to play it up for the camera.
There we go. There's my thumbnail.
There it is.
The fact that he's wearing a Swamp Thing hoodie is that's his regular everyday apparel.
Yeah. It's not prepped at all.
No, we don't do that. We don't do that.
Little peek behind the curtain. That is true, though. That's Marco. That's not. We aren't joking about that part.
That's not for the bit.
Well, always on brand, right? So.
Exactly.
Always.
There you go. So a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we were actually lucky enough to interview Mike Perkins, and we had a great conversation with him. And it feels like we are completing the puzzle in a lot of ways because we got the other, one of the other major pieces of the Swamp Thing book. But there's so much to talk about with Ron, and we're going to get into all of that here in just a moment. But before we do, I do want to let you guys that are listening know where you can find us all over the internet. Of course, we are the Comics Pals. If you've never heard of us before, our show drops every single Monday where we talk about the comic book characters you love, wherever you can find them. We're covering the news of the industry, and we're interviewing fabulous creators just like Ron today. So if you want us, you can follow us on all social media platforms. You can follow us wherever it is that you get your podcast. While you're doing that, make sure that you guys are leaving us a rating or a review wherever it is you're listening. If you're on YouTube, thank you very much. Like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to be made aware of more content like this. Last but not least, if you want to chat with us directly, join our Discord server. Come hang out with us. We're always having fun conversations. If you want to talk about Falcon Winter Soldier, listen to We Watched Falcon Winter Soldier, and then come to the TV Party Discord server where there are only black boxes because it's spoilers everywhere. We're having a great time with that and our sister show, We Watch Invincible. Great content for you guys. Enough shilling, enough plugging. Put the spotlight on Rom. Let's dive into it. So we're going to start, because I know we can't do it any other way. Marco won't allow it. We're going to start with the Swamp Thing. Now, on this podcast, we're fans of Swamp Thing, Marco more than the rest of us, but we've all expressed a love and an interest of the character. Now, you're taking this character, this sort of moniker, and you're doing something a little different than what's come before. And we're only 2 issues deep into the run so far. We did have the Future State issues that came before. What can you tell us about what inspired you to want to tackle Swamp Thing? Because Swamp Thing is a character that has been blessed to have so many great creators work on him. So what brings you to the table for Swamp Thing?
Well, it started for me when DC got in touch and they said, "Hey, we're kind of putting this 5G thing into motion, and we'd like for you to be a part of it. So here's a list of characters that are up for discussion. What would you like to do?" And so it was a pretty open-ended question, and I went back with a couple of pitches, one of which was Swamp Thing. Um, and I kind of went back and I said, look, if I'm going to do a Swamp Thing book, I have to make it new somehow. And part of the way Swamp Thing works for me is that the mechanism of the hero, the creature from the swamp, remains fresh and new. Like you can tell endless number of stories with it. So then I kind of asked my question that, okay, well then why has this character kind of gotten to a point where it feels like we've seen a lot of stories and we've seen a lot of them being told over and over again? And I realized that, well, it's because on a human level, on the human drama level, that it's Alec Holland. And there's only so many times you can keep telling the story of how Alec Holland and Abby Arcane fell in love. And really, that is at the center of that character. And I felt like, okay, well, it's kind of time to move on to another character with a different set of dramas, different set of concerns. The other concern I had was also Alec Holland was certainly a character of his time, and so reflected concerns of his time. And you can still read that now, and the stories that Alan Moore did, or Scott Snyder after him, or Len Wein and Wrightson before him. All of those stories still work today, but you look at them and you realize they're at differing levels of datedness, in that you're reading it, but you're also aware that this is a product of its time. And so I wanted to tell a story, Swamp Thing story, that felt like it was a product of this time. And the way to do that was to tether Swamp Thing to a new character, a new human host, if you will. And one of the things I told DC when I first started working with them was that my aim was to make superheroes feel like they belong to the world. And it wasn't the rest of the world kind of looking into this American window. And I always hear this argument, and I always scoff at it, and I always hear it from people who are mostly either in America or in Europe. And they say, there are only 6 original stories, or all the original stories have been told, and we're just retelling narratives over and over again. And my response to that is, that's because stories are cultural artifacts, and you've never bothered to look outside of your culture for another story. The moment you start getting stories from other cultures, you start getting stories from Africa, you start getting stories from India, China. All of a sudden, all of the stuff that you thought was structured one way, all of that falls apart. And you realize that, in India, gods are not good or bad. They're massive screw ups, and they create and cause a lot of drama. And there's a value judgment in that. There's a way you tell stories from that. And so that's why I went back and I said, look, I want to tether him to an Indian character, and I want to bring India, its mythology, its politics, its current day ramifications into the story as well. And so we ended up with this thing.
So how did you get paired up with, or did you choose to work with, Mike Perkins on this project?
There's actually a very interesting story there. Mike was supposed to be working on a Swamp Thing project with another writer, as a completely different group. And by the time this whole kind of 5G turned into Future State, this whole shuffle happened, Mike had an option. They were like, look, we're still going to do this Swamp Thing book, the one that you were going to do, and then we're going to do another Swamp Thing series with Ram. I know you said you wanted to do Swamp Thing. Which one do you want to do? So Mike had a choice of picking someone who is a very well-known and well-recognized creator. And off of the strength of the pitch he read, he went, I want to work with Ram. Wow. Which to me was like massive pressure, going like, oh crap, here's this guy here's this guy who's read probably every Swamp Thing issue that came out, has like an encyclopedic knowledge of DCU history, and he's going to be working with me. I better not screw this up. Which I'm glad to say, you know, I think Mike's pretty happy with how things have turned out so far.
And he certainly expressed that when we spoke to him. So he didn't talk bad about you behind your back.
Good. I never watch podcasts from creators who I know, because I'm like, okay, I can't take it if you say something bad about me, so I'm not going to watch it.
So I got this impression from the interview, but the interview was before the Swamp Thing had actually released and was available for us to read. He spoke about how, you know, you really seem to have a grasp on what works about Swamp Thing. And he seemed to be very jazzed about the creative process. And it's apparent to me from, and I think the rest of us, is fair to say, that you guys both really have a deep understanding and respect for the character, and it's coming across in the work. So you talked about what you wanted to bring to the table from your worldview and what you wanted to inject. What was important to you tonally and narratively to bring to the table for this new series in introducing this new character?
I mean, part of the challenge of coming to comics as a writer who is not particularly steeped in comic book history. Like, I didn't grow up reading Marvel, DC, didn't have access to these books as a kid. And so my real kind of introduction to the DCU came through Vertigo when I was in my early 20s. And someone I was dating at the time gave me the first volume of Sandman as a birthday gift. And really, that was kind of the thing that brought me into comics. So I don't have the kind of deep-seated, like, I've read all of Swamp Thing. No, I've only read the highlights, because all of my reading is from going into Google and typing the best Swamp Thing stories ever told. You know? And so my analysis was generally, and so I sort of pay more attention to things that I'm taking on, because I know I don't have that sort of inherent knowledge, if you will. And so my endeavor is always in trying to figure out, like, okay, why does Swamp Thing work? Forget the specifics of it. Forget the character. Forget the specifics of the story. What is it about this icon that works? And this is an easier thing to explain when you look at it in terms of Catwoman. Like, why does Catwoman work? She's a cat burglar. Like an iconic image. Nobody has to explain anything beyond she's a cat burglar, you know? And so I'm always trying to sort of, if you look at it in terms of theme, or if you look at it in terms of philosophy, I'm trying to find that what is the thing that makes this character iconic. And I realize the reason Swamp Thing stories work is because it is the idea of something that is bigger than us looking at us. Swamp Thing is great because it's the world looking at us. It's the natural world looking at us, and passing judgment upon us, passing judgment upon itself, because he's also human, because he's also a vessel for this thing. And like, once you really figure that out, it's possible for you to tell any number of stories with Swamp Thing, and they will all work because you have a lens. You have the lens that makes these stories work.
So you said something there that tied to something that, you know, we kind of clocked during our readings of the first two issues, and I wanted to, and I'm sure you might not be able to tell us all of the specifics, but something that I thought was interesting about your Swamp Thing, right, is that generally when you know, whoever the host has been in the past becomes a Swamp Thing, they kind of lose that tether to their humanity, and then that kind of, you know, frames them as this like tragic hero, right? And seemingly, right, like your Swamp Thing is, you know, kind of going back and forth, and there is kind of like, I guess, this push and pull between the humanity and the Swamp Thing. So could you talk a little bit about that as a theme, like, and what was kind of the thought process behind wanting to add that to, you know, your take on the mythos?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like our idea of what humanity is probably being questioned now more than it was back when the original Swamp Thing stories kind of were coming out. I think maybe mistakenly so, but we had a firmer sense of who we were as humanity back then than we do now. Now we're questioning everything. Now we're going like, okay, are we actually beneficial to the planet, or are we ruining this place that we are in? Have we contributed greatly to the betterment of humanity as a whole, or have we just learned how to exploit each other better? And so, because humanity in itself is also a fluid aspect, I felt like it would be interesting for someone who maintains his humanity, but is now learning to look at himself from the perspective of something that has watched him over eons, since there was no humanity. This thing, green, has watched him and watched us develop to where we are now. And so it has certain perceptions of us, and we have certain perceptions of it. And I think in that conversation, there is something of value, which I don't think other Swamp Thing stories have been able to tap into, because their structure has always been that you lose your humanity, and so you aren't human anymore. And I think I wanted to sort of tap into that sort of how does it feel to be in possession of such a great power and a responsibility, but also guilty for just the way you've treated this planet over all of these years. So I wanted to preserve that humanity and say, instead of wipe the slate clean, no, own your crap and go forward from there.
I love that.
I also love that. It's really cool, the idea that, while we're looking at Swamp Thing and saying, oh, that's a disgusting creature or whatever, Swamp Thing's looking back at humanity and saying, excuse me, you guys have done some things.
Yeah.
Who's
and
the
I
real
think
monster?
I think I've just finished writing issue 5, and I think by the time we've finished this conversation, and hopefully you guys are all getting onto issue 5, you'll start seeing these themes kind of come to the front from behind the veil of subtlety that we've placed so far. So I think pushing into that area of discussion is going to be very interesting for the stories.
I very much look forward to that. I do want to jump into a listener question. We actually had a few listeners who were excited that we were going to be speaking to you. So we have a few of those. So the first one is coming from Tyler over on the Discord, and he says, I have a question for Ram. Titling the book The Swamp Thing is a specific choice, since I can't think of any other time it's been titled that outside of Saga of the Swamp Thing. What's the thinking there?
Well, because when we proposed this, I said, I'm actually the one who went in and said, hey, we should do this as seasons. We should do this as 10 issue installments. And a lot of people tend to think that, it's a 10 issue mini. Why did DC do this? No, it wasn't DC. I proposed this, and Mike and I proposed this when we went into it, because we said, look, I'm not trying to ask for anything, that we're not going to earn. We're going to earn that second season over the run of these first 10 issues. And if you think we've done well enough, if you think the story is doing well enough, then we'll look at another season. It also kind of becomes this way for us to take stock of where we are. Like, okay, what's the theme for the next season? And I feel it's a lot nicer to do it that way, because I think the era of the 150 issue run on something is just gone. I don't think that exists anymore, not in the same way anyway. And so because we were doing this, we knew we were running the risk of making it look like this was a kind of side project Swamp Thing, and not really. And so when it came to the title, both Mike and I were like, no, we got to tell people that this is the only Swamp Thing. So this is the Swamp Thing. It's not non-Alec Holland Swamp Thing, as you would have noticed at the end of the second issue. Alec Holland is very much part of the history of this Swamp Thing, and will be will be kind of pivotal to where the story goes. So we wanted to sort of reflect that with the title.
So you just called out the bit with Alec, right? And I did want to ask about that, given the comment you made about not necessarily being like as steeped in comics history as some other writers that work with the big two. How did you what was your goal for balancing that? Like, you obviously wanted to create a new character and like put a new stamp on the Swamp Thing. But there are these nods to kind of the history and the legacy there as well. And I guess where did you find that line, or has that been a line that's been hard to find?
I mean, I don't think it's been particularly hard. For me, I think part of the joy of working in comics is that there is so much history to it all. I mean, if I was just coming in and I wanted to wipe the slate clean and write another story, I could just tell a creator-owned story. Why am I writing as part of this kind of giant tapestry of other writers, other ideas, and these characters with these huge, long histories? I think part of the joy is to work with that history. And so it would be very rare for me to go in and go like, hey, I just want to wipe the slate clean and then start fresh with this character. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Totally.
that part of the joy of storytelling for me is to go like, how can I make this all connect with 1981 Swamp Thing? And so this has been part of my theme for things I've pitched. Like, I won't mention the character, but I pitched a story for a character that hasn't been seen in like 40 years. And the editor who I was talking about this with, they said, why are we trying to make everything connect back to something that no one's read? I'm like, look, it doesn't matter that no one's read it, because the people who haven't read it are going to read it and they're going to go, wow, this is a cool story. But the people who have read it are going to read it and go, wow, this is a cool story, but it also connects to the thing that I remember from. And there's joy in that. And I appreciate that joy. And as a creator, there's a flex in going like, look, this is a totally new story, but I made it work with something that happened 40 years ago. Yeah. So I enjoy doing that.
So I read Catwoman coming into this, and I really, really, really enjoyed what you've been doing with Catwoman so far. Now, personally, and I'm only speaking for me, I've not been a big fan of the character by herself. I think a lot of times there's a treading of ground that happens. And so you found her in a very interesting place when you sort of jumped on the book. That was smack dab in the middle of the event. What was it? The Joker
War, yeah.
The Joker War. Thank you.
It was right at the end of Joker War, actually.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. You found her right at the end of the Joker War, and there was kind of this explosion in the Bat continuity area of DC. Mm-hmm. And here you come. So what was important to you to accomplish with the character coming into it from that perspective?
I mean, I knew we were going to be in a position where because of Joker War and because of the events that went through, that Selina and Bruce were going to be a bit strained, if you will. And so, I looked at it as an opportunity to do the thing you talked about, where you said, the character on her own seemed to be lacking a kind of basis as to, okay, well, why does this character exist, and why is she important? Why are her stories important outside of their relationship with Batman? Mm-hmm. And so when I came in, that was my first instinct, is to go like, okay, well, we're going to tell a story where her actions become important, just as Batman's actions impinge on her life in Gotham. like her actions are going to feed back into whatever Batman and Bat event and things around him. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I also wanted to build a mythology of her own, give her own villains, give her own, supporting cast and her own motivations. And so I don't know if you remember the early issues, but when she came in, she kind of makes this mission statement where she says, people don't remember who the Catwoman was, and it's time to remind people who the Catwoman is. And so I feel like she set about doing that. And now the story's kind of leaning into the direction where she's worked so hard to sort of set her own boundaries and her own world up in this corner of Gotham. But now she's annoyed that stuff from the Bat side of Gotham keeps leaking into her vicinity, and she's going to have to deal with it. And I think there's going to be a need to deal with it on her own. And so that is going to lead to ramifications, tensions. So I'm quite enjoying that side of it. And then I knew when I came in that this was going to scratch a street level crime itch for me. There's a cat.
I was going to say, look, we're talking about Catwoman and the cats start coming.
As my recent collaborator now, Evan Cagle, who's going to draw issue 32 of Catwoman, says, everything you pitch eventually refers to The Wire, Ram. Do you like The Wire or something?
Wait,
Sean's face. Sean just blew up.
Yeah, I love The Wire.
I'm obsessed with The Wire. I'm currently rewatching it. I'm on season 3.
Yeah. So a lot of Catwoman plot is structured off The Wire. I mean, it's not quite paced like The Wire, because if I pace it like The Wire, I don't think I'll last very long on the book. But yeah, a lot of the sort of plot tensions, the plot lines are based off of things like The Wire, partly things like Shield, which is the Michael Chiklis show. So this is definitely scratching my 90s crime TV show itch. Yeah.
So I'm sure this will be news to everyone, but I'm actually going to be launching a podcast about The Wire. I just thought of it right now, and it'd be great if you were the first guest, so we can just sit for an hour and talk about it.
Well, I'm also the kind of guy who likes to let the work speak for itself, so I don't want to go too much into like what parts of The Wire am I leading on.
Sure, yeah, of course.
But I mean, anyone who's watched at least the first three seasons can see where the commonalities lie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just always nice to meet a fellow Wire fan in the wild. So we got another question. Speaking of Catwoman, from Matt over on the Discord. He says, "I'd love to hear you guys ask him about Catwoman and how he finds writing titles affected by events and a core book like Batman versus Swamp Thing or creator-owned books. So, what's it like kind of coming into a title, knowing that you have to tie it into this event, and so you're, I don't want to say, shackled, because you took it as an opportunity, at least the way that I read it. Yeah. But it does play a factor versus something like Swamp Thing, where you get to kind of come in and, do your own thing unfettered by anything else."
I mean, to be honest, again, that's part of the joy of working in comics. Like, why are you in comics if you don't like writing things that tie into events? Like, especially big two comics. Like, come on, every few months there's going to be some kind of thing where someone's going to come up and say, we want these things to cross over. And if you particularly find that part of the job to be intrusive or something, then you should really be questioning what part of the industry that you're working in. Because I could totally see the need to have a singular voice and the need to be able to do your own thing. But it's like being part of a band, man. You can't be part of a band and go like, I want to play a 30-minute solo in the middle of this song. Not going to happen. You're going to have to work with someone else's rhythm, work with someone else's riff, And part of the joy of it is to go like, okay, I can place this thing on top of what you're doing and it'll sound cool. And I think you have to look at stories that way. I certainly do with Catwoman. Like, there are definitely events that are happening on the bad side that are going to influence what's happening with Selena. And the part of the joy for me is in recognizing what I've been doing and then what someone else has been doing, and then going like, oh wait, these two things can kind of play into each other, and that makes it really cool. So I quite enjoy that. I look at that as part of the challenge, part of the joy of working in superhero comics, to be honest.
You mentioned sort of working within that band. When it comes to working with other creators, Mike recently shared a splash page of the title for this most recent issue, where he should have mentioned that you had this idea and he kind of was the one who brought it to life. How do you typically work? What is the capacity to which you work with your artists? Or I'm thinking of people like Anand RK as well. Like, how do you typically work with your artists and form that cohesion with that band per se?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been the kind of guy who doesn't mind being a little bit pushy when it comes to collaborations. I know there are creators who will look at work that comes in from artists and say that, okay, whatever you do is fine, and that's what I'll work with. Or equally, I know there are writers who will send out a script and go, well, that's me done. I have no further say in how this book turns out. I am 100% not one of those guys. I will send a script. It will have sketches linked in it. It will have a billion references. It will have things that go, I'll give you a call on Tuesday morning and we'll discuss this, because if I write this down on page, it'll be a 3-page essay. And I don't want to be blamed for writing whole books as scripts like a certain Mr. Moore did. So I don't mind doing that over the phone. So yeah, Mike and I have, Zoom calls all the time. And then I pretty much have a call every time he does a few thumbnails, and then we'll sit for a couple of hours and go like, why did you make this choice? This is what I was intending. This is how I think it works in my head. So it is very much like a band. And I think a lot of times when people review the work that I'm a part of, they'll come in and say, oh, this doesn't feel like 3 different people made this book. It feels like a singular vision. And that's the ultimate compliment, right? Like if you went on stage as a band and played a song, you want people to talk about the song. You don't want people to talk about the vocalist or the guitarist or the drummer. You want people to talk about the song. And so that's kind of my take on the whole thing. I know there are a lot of artists that I've spoken to. When I say that, they're like, I would be so pissed off if someone told me what to do with the art. And I appreciate that, but I'm still going to do it. Sorry.
Hey man, you gotta, you know what you want, and there's no docking that.
I respect that.
I mean, the greatest thing working with someone like Mike is I've genuinely, like, there's a email from me going like, Mike, I know I can be annoying and pushy and I can send sketches and a million suggestions. So if I'm going overboard, 100% let me know, and it is not personal. Like, I won't take it poorly. And Mike wrote back and said, I know when to ignore your suggestions. And also, thankfully, most of the times they are at least intended to make the work feel better. And so as long as that's true, like, I'm totally cool with people totally ignoring my suggestion and going like, nah, that doesn't work.
I mean, I feel like that sounds like an ideal.
That it's been considered. Yeah.
That sounds like an ideal creative partnership, right? Like, open to your feedback, but if he thinks it's a bad idea, he'll tell you.
Yeah, and as it should be, you know.
I think I definitely felt that in Graffiti's Wall, so I got a chance to read that one through, and I loved it. You guys were definitely, I think, that cohesive unit that you mentioned, and I'm glad that you guys said that you were working so closely, that collaboratively, because I had a question on specifically the silences that you guys use in a few of the pages and a few of the panels, or a number of them. There are moments where you would sort of expect like the honking of horns because of you're in the busy streets of Mumbai, the chanting of protesters, the when I think one of the moments that stood out to me was when Graffiti's father like took a drag of his cigarette, and it's there, but it's all quiet, right? What was the decision there to be able to balance that out with the interpersonal sound talkative moments versus like contrasted against those silences?
I mean, a lot of it is nebulous and intangible, and it's a matter of feel. So I don't know that I can like put my finger on like this is the mechanism of how silences work in comic, but I look at all art, and this is a weird take, but all art to me is intended to be a vehicle for some form of synesthesia, right? So you look at a painting and it makes you feel something. It reminds you of a texture or a sound. Or you listen to a song and it generates images in your head. So I imagine a comic kind of works the same way. And sometimes like a picture is enough to generate the sound, or at least the feeling of the sound in your head. Maybe you don't hear it, but it has the same effect. So I feel like if there's that panel where there are protesters in the street, like you can see the rage and the anger and the sort of disobedience in their body language, in the way their hands are drawn, in the way the fist is made. You don't need the sound there. Equally, that makes, whenever I do decide to use a sound, that makes that panel feel like, oh, I really should be paying attention to this. So like I've got a new book coming out called The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, issue 1, page 1 of which is already out, so I can talk about it. It's in the preview, but it's basically talking about this guy driving through a traffic jam in Mumbai. And that conversation gets randomly interrupted for no reason, no narrative purpose, by a traffic police cop blowing his whistle. There's just a whole panel of him blowing the whistle. And at least for me, when you're reading it, it's almost like you're reading it and someone stopped you. You got distracted because someone blew a whistle really loudly in the back of your whatever room. And that's the kind of stuff that you can do with comics that's really exciting to me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. It does. No, totally satisfies that question. I appreciate that. And it's also interesting because Blue and Green was one where it's specifically another one of your image creator-owned titles was another one where specifically focused around music, around the sound. We got another question from Discord around it. Sultan of Swing says that he's very interested to know if there was any historical inspiration for Blue and Green, as well as any musical inspiration, and that he loved the book.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you. And the musical inspiration, I mean, is pretty much on every page. Blue and Green, the name itself is a Miles Davis song. Part of the reason I used that title was I'd have discussions with people who weren't particularly jazz listeners. And when you started talking about jazz, they'd always go like, oh yeah, it's that kind of show tuney, happy stuff. And I'd play Blue and Green and I go like, this is haunting. Like it's beautiful in places, it's sad in places, it's playful in places, but it haunts you in some way. Like there's an undercurrent there that you can't quite put your finger on. Totally. And people agree. And so I wanted to do a jazz story that was haunting in some way. And so Blue and Green, the title kind of played into that. There's title references throughout the story, like make references to Charles Mingus songs. There's references to other tracks from Coltrane. So I mean, there's also like a whole playlist that I made from all the songs that were mentioned in the book. So there's certainly historic inspirations that way. It's also born off my time in Philly, which is really the first time that I could experience all the stuff that I had looked at from afar as a kid growing up in India. Like my dad had a huge music collection, and so we'd listen to blues and jazz. And so I'd heard the music and I knew that it was supposed to be connected to all of this imagery of smoky bar rooms and, whiskey stains on top of pianos. But I'd never been to any place like that. And then when I moved to Philly, there was a place in Philly, which is now closed, sadly, called Ortlieb's Jazz House. And it was the kind of place, I think it was inside, the entrance was inside a shipping container.
Oh, that's rad.
That's awesome.
And there were no signs outside that said, Ortlieb's is here or anything. You had to kind of know how to get there. And then once you went in, it was brilliant. It was like all dimmed down and burgundy and red everywhere. And they did 2 sets. And the second set started at 10:30 at night. And the second set was always great because all the people who would be regulars would start coming in. So you realize like the guy playing the music already knows half the crowd that's there to listen to him. And so there was that sense that I wanted to, I want to set a story in this atmosphere, if you will. So I used that. And then there was all the late 60s, New York, the city crumbling, and the race riots of that time, and the implications of race and being a Black entertainer, a popular Black entertainer in New York at the time. All of that also filters into the story and the idea of like, what are you sacrificing to be successful,
That was another book that you worked with, Anand. And I was curious, a lot of writers write books for certain artists. And I'm curious if you did adapt your writing, because the styles are so different between Blue and Green and Graffiti as well. Like, was there something that you had to do differently to be able to communicate those things for him?
Yeah, I had to ask Anand to adapt to the book,
Okay.
which is why I laughed. It's funny, the story of this. Like, I went to Anand and I said, I've seen you do your sort of sketchbook things. I've seen you use watercolors in painting, and I feel like you can do this style that hasn't been seen since McKean and Sienkiewicz were
Yep.
kind of properly working in comics. And he was like, I don't know that I can pull it off. And I said, look, it doesn't have to be the way they did it. Just do pencils and go over them with digital colors, and you'll be able to achieve a similar look. And he was like, nah, it's impossible, not going to work. So he tried. I think we spent like 2 months of Anand just trying different styles, like working with markers, ink, traditional media. And then we eventually settled on a style where he was like, yes, this works. And then after he had done that, I went back to him and said, look, I don't want to be the guy who does this, but that's basically pencils and digital colors on top. And he went, oh yeah, that's true. So I basically have never let him live that down. I bring it up at every opportunity.
Yeah. I love the idea that he's like, that's impossible, and then spent 2 months figuring it out. It's like, nah, all right, I can do it.
So you were one of several creators who are coming at comics from a different point of view than particularly American comics are approached typically. You talked about wanting to bring, something different to the table, and it's been great to watch over the last 10, 15 years as comics have gotten more diverse, more women, more people of color have been coming into the industry with different things to say. Is that something that is important to you as a creator, to say something different, to bring a different sort of beat to the things that we have seen? Because so far, we talked about Catwoman, and that feels to me very different than Catwoman that I've read. We talked about the Swamp Thing, and that's obviously very different.
And confirm.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to consult
You have to,
the
bro.
expert.
Yep.
Right.
I'll allow it.
Is that something that you think is important? Is it incumbent upon creators who have the diverse experience, who have a different perspective, to bring that to the books and show people, show fans, show executives, frankly, show editors that there's more? Is that something that's important to you?
Yeah, I'm reminded of a Raymond Chandler, Raymond Carver quote, where he talks about how he is tired of seeing cleverness from writers. Like, he has no time for people who are trying to be clever or people who are trying to use tricks. And then he says something that's always stuck with me. He says, sometimes a writer should just be able to look at something like an old shoe or a sunrise and still be able to look at it with awe and curiosity and wonder. And I think that's very true. But I'll take that and translate that to the question you just asked, which is, the writer's job is to take things that are familiar to everyone and yet find a way to present them in a very unfamiliar way where it becomes new again. Like, sure, in comics, you're always doing crazy stuff, sentient black holes and dragons and whatnot. But a good writer can just write the story of a man whose relationship is falling apart and still engage you in the same way that you were engaged, if you've read that story 10 times before from 10 other writers. And so you realize it's not the story, it's not the idea, it's what the writer brings or the artist brings, the creator brings to that idea. And so I feel like, regardless of whether you are that same old American writer or you are coming from a completely different demographic, completely different country, whatever it is, if you call yourself a writer and you take your job seriously, then it is your job to bring something unique to whatever you do. And so I think part of that sort of diversity discussion is exactly that a lot of large corporation think that they can get away with enacting diversity by paying it lip service. Like, look, here's a character who is not the same as all the other characters before. Like, okay, that's step one. That's important. Don't get me wrong. That's important. Representation is important. Diversity is important. But that's step one. I want to start seeing diversity of storytelling. I want to start seeing diversity of ideas. And those things are necessarily part and parcel of what it means to be a writer who takes their work seriously.
And how important is it in your mind that the big two prioritize those voices?
I think it's very important. But I'll go one step further. I think it's important that the big two prioritize those voices not only in their involvement as creators, but prioritize those voices in encouraging their stories to become part of the stories that are being told. It's cool to hire people, but it's even more important to go like, okay, I've hired you and I want you to tell your story. I don't want you to tell the same story that's been told 20 years ago. And I think there's a distinct difference between those two things, because like, your tendency is to do the things that have safely worked for you from an editorial perspective. For instance, if I want to write a page that's in a different language to English, like, I've tried to do that. And a number of times I'll get editorial pushback. I'm like, people are not going to understand this. I'm like, people don't, like, vast majority of the world is multilingual right now. most people know at least 2 languages, even in the States. Certainly in Europe, certainly in other parts of the world. Like English is not my first language. And so why this reticence then to it's okay for people to read words that they don't understand and have to look them up. It's fine. You don't have to spoon feed everyone. And I think that kind of understanding, that kind of approach to diversity in their stories, it's okay to present a different view of history than what is the accepted norm. And I think that kind of stuff will take time, certainly. But hopefully there's thoughtful and willful pushing into that direction, because it's only at that point that we're going to start getting stories that truly feel like I'm picking up something new about humanity each time I read one of these things. And I think that was part of the joy of reading comics, really, wasn't it? Like even the old classic stuff was showing you things that you had never considered before. And I'm not sure we're still doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we talk about on this show a lot. And I think it's definitely fair to say, which is why I think it's so exciting when there is a writer like you who comes in, like, gives you something different, because there's hunger for it. Like, I know as a reader, like you said, like, I've read the same story, watched the same story so many times that you get numb to it. So yeah, I think that's a great answer. I really appreciate that perspective. Rob, I did want to ask you one fun question, because we've been doing a lot of really heady stuff, which is like our bread and butter. But I do want to ask you just like one fun thing, because you mentioned before how when you pitched on the Swamp Thing that there was like a number of pitches that you had submitted as a part of that process. And I'm sure you can't tell us what the specifics of those are, because Lord knows maybe they'll get picked up some other day. Right. But something I love to ask creators is, like, are there any kind of like characters or like any of those kinds of legacy pieces of history things that you would love to get your hands on? Like, if it was just, you've got, full reign, do whatever the hell you want, what would that be? So
I'm going to give you a tangential answer. I'm not going to give you a non-answer, but I'm going to give you a tangential answer. I don't have those kind of dream characters, again, because I didn't grow up with that kind of history. But I have, and part of this is like some kind of weird literary obsessive behavior, where I look at something and I go, there's a story idea here that no one has done, and it's bothering me that no one has done it because it's so obvious. I'll give you an example. Vampires as colonialism. Surely someone would have done that. And I thought that with These Savage Shores, when I was pitching the idea, that of course someone must have done it. And then I looked it up and I said, well, no one's done this. And now it's bothering me because it's right there. And so when I pitched These Savage Shores, that was the idea behind it. So on Big Two stuff, it's things like that, where I look at a character and I go, like, how has no one done this with this character? And so there are definitely concepts like that that I would like to explore, but not with particular characters. So that, with that caveat placed, I certainly have ideas for Batman. I certainly have ideas for Green Lantern. Certainly have ideas on the Marvel side of things for Strange and Moon Knight. So yeah.
Man.
I love that. Well, and I love that answer, because I think that's so much more exciting than like, oh yeah, I'd really love to write Moon Knight. Like, I love that you're coming at it from this place of like, what is the freshest idea I can come at or inject or whatever. And I think that's why I can at least speak for myself. I think that's why I respond to your work, is that like I get that. Like, I get that feeling from you that like you're trying to do something fresh and new, and like that is just so exciting.
to put it in a different way, it's the take that excites me more than the character. So
Totally.
So I mean, partly sometimes to much to the disappointment of my editors, because I'll go like, this character from this old DC guidebook that no one's read or touched in 3 decades. I have a fresh take on it, and so the editor's just like, but no one's gonna read this, Rob, because there is no readership. I'm like, I don't care. I have a take.
Of course it's a fresh take. Nobody's touched it since 1945.
So what I'm hearing is we're getting an ambush bug series from Rom.
That's too recent.
No?
Too recent.
Okay.
No. There are some characters that I brought up that editors were like, who? Like,
That's a flex. That's awesome.
You need to name them and shame them.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, because I mean, I guess from a purely writing perspective, right? You either want to do like, oh my God, he did not take this most popular character and just do a completely weird take on them, or you want to do, no one cares who this character is, do whatever the hell you want, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is take a middle of the road character and do a middle of the road take, because that's like, to me, that's the most boring thing you could do. So yeah, bring it on. I will either totally mess up your greatest characters or totally revitalize them.
And that's the Rom V guarantee.
Yeah, man. Like, if you're gonna fail, at least do it flamboyantly. You know.
What a quote. That's brilliant.
It's unforgettable, at least.
Yeah. I mean, you look at all the greats. I mean, I certainly don't think all of Morrison's work is successful, but all of it is at least weird as hell.
Yes,
Like, I certainly don't think all of Alan Moore or Warren Ellis or any of the sort of big writers that you look up to now and go like, okay, you hold their work up. That's great. They've all had, in my opinion, failures, but that's part and parcel. If you can't risk a failure, then you're never going to do anything interesting.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Speaking of interesting, we can't let you go without talking about the many deaths of Laila Starr. So we were lucky enough to read this book a little bit in advance.
Mm-hmm.
We got to read the first issue. This is from Boom, and I really, really enjoyed it. I love books that confuse me and that I have to really, it's kind of like The Wire, pay attention. You know, that's like the quote.
Of course.
I love books that force me to pay attention to everything that's going on. One of the things that I noticed, and this is just how it made me feel, was claustrophobic. A lot of the pages have, quite a few panels on them. A lot of times they're very small. You see only a portion of a character's face. It really makes you feel this claustrophobic feeling. And in addition to that, so I like that the stage is set in that way. But then in addition to that, you did something that I'm also a big fan of. You have this character who, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's certainly, it's in the title, The Many Deaths, right?
Sure.
I love that. I love that. And so I would love for you to just talk about why this book exists for you, why this was a story that you had to tell, and if you can tease us a little with anything that is to come.
Yeah, I mean, actually, there's a very long history and tradition of Indian stories that are obsessed with the idea of death coming to the mortal plane. So the Indian god of death is a god called Yama or Kali, depending on who you attribute certain qualities of death to. But this story of like Yama coming to Earth has been done so many times. And so I wanted to do a story about death coming to Earth. And my obvious references were for it. The moment I thought of that idea, I was like, yeah, but already, Gaiman's already done it. So what am I going to do? And the thing that struck me was like, death is a cultural concept. The way, you know, the way Christianity thinks about death is not the same way Hinduism thinks about death. The way Americans think about death is not the same as the way Indians think about death. And so I thought there was a lot of interesting counterpoints there. And so it kind of fell into that thing that I do where I take something that is familiar to you and then I go like, but no, you've not read this version of it. Which I've been doing with a lot of my creator work, if you think about it. Like Black Mamba, which is my self-published book, was crime noir. And so people are like, of course I've read crime noir. Yeah, except there's no crime in the book. And then, D. Savage, oh, it's vampires. No, it's really about colonialism. And so with Laila Starr, it's this kind of, oh yeah, it's about death. And she's come down to the mortal plane. Of course I've read this before. No, you've not, because the way the Hindu religion in India and Indians treat death is very different, especially considering it's a claustrophobic country of 1.2 billion people, many of whom I'm sure they die pretty regularly, and so death is a much more integral and closer part of daily life than you would imagine in other places. Also, India has so many religions that live right next to each other. Like when I was growing up, I grew up next to a Parsi Tower of Silence, which is this place where they do open air burials for their dead. So it's just this massive tower with vultures flying in circles above it, and you can see it from your house every day. So it's amazing, and so I felt like, yeah, there's certainly room for me to talk about all of that in a comic. So I did that. The other thing I wanted to do was play around with the idea of the many deaths of Laila Starr, if you will. I just like the idea of a god who's immortal and obsessed with death having to die over and over again. So I think we'll see that play out. And then that lends itself to a kind of formalism that I like playing with. So like there are issues that are narrated by burning cigarettes and whatnot. So we'll see.
Oh, wait a second.
I love that. Yeah.
I love it. I love that we got that little tease, so I won't even press it. That's awesome and very, very cool. Make sure that you guys are picking up The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. It's out this
April 21st.
April 21st, right? So definitely check that out. If you'll permit, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So you mentioned how you want, or it would be ideal if editors pushed creators to bring their lived experience, bring something different to the table. And that's something that I think we can all agree to. But given your outsiders, quote unquote, perspective on American comics, is there one thing outside of what we talked about that you think needs to change in order for this industry to thrive?
The fetishization of war and policing needs to change. I think the fundamental difference between cultures from where hopeful stories start coming out versus stories that seem to focus on the inevitability of it all is that I think far too many countries and cultures are defined by their wars and by their losses and by how many people died in what event on what day and what we had to give up to earn these free. No, man, like people were born free. Nobody had to earn their freedom. People were born free and people will continue to be born free. We fight wars for a lot of reasons, but it's not fair to saddle entire generations with the debt of that, the emotional debt of it, the the national debt of it, really. And so I feel like the more we can move away with fetishizing violence and war as a way of demonstrating bravery or demonstrating strength, the more we'll start getting interesting stories. And it is a thing that is culturally certainly much more prevalent in American comics and European comics to an extent, and it's certainly not so much so in other countries. And the I mean, look at Japanese manga. I mean, their subjects of choice are just like, okay, this is a house husband and he has developed a way of, like, why can't we see more stories like that coming out of Europe and America, or Indians obsessed with the idea of reincarnation and just constantly being born into the same life to do the same thing. No one cares about war if you're going to be born into the same shit over and over again,
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
I feel like there needs to be more room for those narratives also to come to the fore. And I think we'll start seeing more interesting stories the more we push towards that. And this is not a criticism of American comics per se. It's just a criticism of the kind of storytelling we're seeing kind of dominating our cultural spaces, if you will.
Yeah, no, and that's a conversation that's ongoing, right? We talk about defunding the police and all these different things, and I feel like those are all kind of interconnected in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel like we need to stop attaching value judgments to really what are functions within society. Yeah, protecting people is a function, but it doesn't automatically make it great or brave or wonderful. It's not better to protect someone than to be a guy who created paintings. Like, an artist is no less valuable than a soldier, is no less valuable than a teacher, So I think we need to look at all of those things with that kind of a balanced context, and I think we'll be better for it.
Well, Ram, thank you for bringing balance to this podcast. We really appreciate we really appreciate you coming on. This has been an incredible conversation, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
pleasure.
so much for your time.
I'm glad.
So again, The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, you said April 26th?
April 21st.
April 21st. Thank you very much. Doing my job for me. Appreciate you. April 21st. Make sure you guys check that out.
I have to know when my books are coming out. So.
If anyone's going to know, right? And of course, make sure you guys are reading the new Swamp Thing, or the Swamp Thing. It is the Swamp Thing. Can't forget the Swamp Thing. It is awesome, and you guys will not regret picking it up. Season 1. If you support the book, then we can get a season 2. So let's do it.
Let's go.
And we have some really, really weird ideas for season 2. So do it.
Yes.
I want to get to the really weird shit after this conversation. Like, let me get to the cigarette narrated issue of Swamp Thing.
Well, I explained the idea to Mike last week, and he immediately went onto Facebook and said, okay, I really need for everyone to support this book just so I can draw what I discussed last night. So.
Everybody go buy a second copy.
Why not? Buy one for a friend, right? Where can the listeners keep up with you on social? Where can they find out more about you?
I'm on Twitter. I'm the right Ram on Twitter as opposed to the wrong one. I'm Ram Writes on Instagram. These are the two places where I'm most active. I've also got a website, ram-v.com, which I promise I will update next week. Those are the places you can find me. I'm generally the kind of person who broadcasts about his books, and I don't really do much more than that on social media. The best place to talk to me about anything else is you'll have to come over to London and buy me a drink. So,
challenge accepted.
I'm in.
All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. So that was obviously an incredible conversation with Ram. Definitely do check out his work if you haven't done that yet. Many Deaths of Lila Starr is a perfect place to start alongside the Swamp Thing. Again, that book, Lila Starr, drops on April 21st. And by the way, thank you to those of you who had questions. We really appreciate it when you guys hit us with those questions for creators. I know that it probably makes them feel good to know that people are anticipating them coming on the show, that we had questions ready from you all. So it means a lot, and keep it up. We've got more creators coming for sure. So whenever you guys, if it's someone that you're into, feel free, because we are able to ask. So if you want your questions answered, ask them in the Discord or write in at thecomicspals@gmail.com.
And if you haven't checked out the Swamp Thing yet, don't forget our review of Swamp Thing #2. It's up right now. Check it out.
Yes,
There it is.
exactly.
There it is.
There it is.
So we've got a lot more show to do here. We've got quite a few more things to talk about. We've got a few trailers that dropped this week that we gotta take a look at, including Jupiter's Legacy. Marvel gave us a double dose this week with Black Widow and Loki. And some big news about what's going on in the X-Men neck of the woods. But before we get into all of those things, we do have to talk about our polls this week, of course. What would a Comics Pals episode be without Pals polls? So I have from Marco, we've got Lock and Key,
Oh, yes.
Sandman, Hell and Gone #1. Marco, that is a mouthful. What did I just say?
So this is a crossover between Lock and Key, IDW and DC, Lock and Key, Sandman universe, where, as people might know, Lock and Key is all about keys specifically that have certain powers, magical powers ascribed to them. And someone had the really good idea to be like, hey, the key to hell in Sandman, what if that was a key within the Lock and Key universe? What would that do? And so this is going to be that.
That's cool.
Yeah. So somehow, some way, somebody within the Locke family is going to find the key to hell, and presumably either Lucifer and or Morpheus is going to have to deal with something. And that shit's right up my alley. And I'm super excited for this. I've been waiting for this for I want to say 6 months when they first had the preview out. The 0 issue, for anybody who's interested, is out. So you can get kind of context as to Hell. You can also get context into where Lock and Key sort of stands. It combines 2 big stories. And one of those is a story that always manages to make me tear up. I'm forgetting the name. I'm going to look it up really quick, but the writing there, Joe Hill, excellent. And I'm wondering if Neil Gaiman's going to come back to do some stuff.
Man, the way you laid that down, I've never even read Lock and Key.
Oof.
And that what you just said sounds so cool.
Yeah, dude. There's a few where he's just a strong horror writer, but he really gets he really gets the emotional human parts of people, and it's perfect in Lock and Key.
I think you would really like Lock and Key, Sean.
Yeah.
I might have to give it a whirl. I tried the Netflix series, and I didn't really like the first episode.
It's nothing like it.
Yeah,
nothing like it.
Very different.
Yeah, that is a watered down easy mode on fucking Halo or some shit.
Yeah, it's family friendly basically.
Yeah,
I see. Okay. You also chose Phantom on the Scan #1.
Oh, this is a Cullen Bunn book. Anything that he puts out, I'm there. You're gonna get me with something, and it's definitely gonna be Cullen Bunn, his horror stuff. This is another one of those books, and so I'm there to pick it up.
Beautiful. Pete chose Proctor Valley Road #2.
Yeah, so we reviewed Proctor Valley 1. This is, of course, the new creator-owned series from one Grant Morrison. Forgive me, I don't remember the rest of the creative team, but I enjoyed the first issue, and I thought that it set up a cast of characters and kind of like a good mystery that it struck a chord with me right away. So I'm interested to see where it goes. Grant stuff definitely isn't always for me. And it's interesting because this like weirdly feels a little more grounded, even though it is dealing with the supernatural. And that worked for me too. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
Awesome. Same here. So I chose this first one that I'm going to mention might surprise people. Rorschach number 7. I'm going to tell you this right now.
You still reading that book?
Not only am I still reading it, it's genuinely in my top 3 favorite pulls week in or month in, month out.
Come on.
I love it.
Really?
That's wild.
I love it.
That's bold.
I think it is so good. I think it was either issue 5 or 6. It features a conversation between 2 of the characters via mail. Like they're writing each other letters. You read that one?
Yeah, that was good. I think we had a discussion with somebody in the Discord about it.
Okay. That shit hit me hard.
Okay.
That for me, that was very powerful. I love what Tom King is doing. It feels so good to be excited and enjoying genuinely a Tom King book. I mean, I enjoy Strange Adventures as well, but like this there was a lot of like concern about how this book would go. And for me, it's going really well. I love it. Jorge Fornes is doing a tremendous job. This is awesome. I implore you to pick it up. If you can get past the fact that it's called what it is, even though the book has nothing to do with Rorschach. Rorschach number 7. Loving it.
Is it working on the month-to-month format in the way that like a lot of our critique for Strange Adventures seems to be? It would work really well in one sitting versus the month-to-month format.
Man, you know those like those images on social media where it's like a dude in the middle of like all these swords.
Yeah.
It's like, what's your hot take that's gonna like cause this to happen to you? Mine is that if your book does not work month to month, your book does not work.
Damn.
And that's just how I feel. That's the way that unless it specifically comes out as a graphic novel trade, that's just not, it's meant to be read the way it's released. And so yeah, for me it does work that way. For me, the book is working month to month. I am in suspense as I await the next issue. That's where I like to be.
High praise. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think it depends on the issue that it's been working, but I think I mostly agree with that, Sean.
I'm glad to hear that. We haven't spoken about the book in a while, so I'm glad that we're not reviewing it for the show, but I'm glad to know that you're actually getting something out of it, even if it's not to the degree that I am.
Maybe we do a book club.
Yo, hop on the Discord, bro. We can talk about it.
Word. And we'll see, depending on where the interest is when it wraps up, because we wanted to do Mr. Miracle, but then that kind of ended weird.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
We'll see. We'll see how things feel once we get to the end of that story. But the other book that I chose for this week that I'm really excited about is actually Spider-Man Spider Shadow number 1. So this is from one Chip Zdarsky, who is firing on all cylinders from the writer end with the assist from Pasquale Ferry. So the premise here is pretty cool. So this is like a return to What If. They're just not calling it What If. And the idea is essentially, what if Spider-Man was Venom?
Ooh.
Oh yeah,
I do remember. Yeah. I remember the pitch for that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, what if he was Venom? What if he's keeping that on the low? Almost like, I don't know if this is Chip's intent, but what if almost like he was a drug addict, almost like he was addicted to the symbiote and keeping it from his friends and family, and his life kind of spiraling out of control. That's the pitch.
That's interesting because he kind of touched on that in Life Story. a little bit.
Oh yeah,
You remember that?
yeah.
It's kind of like as Peter was getting older or whatever. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about that.
We gonna review that one next week?
Yeah.
Let's do
I
it.
think we should.
Cool.
If you want us to, should let us know. So let's jump into the news. We've got a Jupiter's Legacy trailer. And we're actually going to pull it up here for you guys. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to watch along with us as we break down what we got out of this trailer. So I'm actually going to pull that up for you guys now.
Do it up.
Yeah. Here we go.
Wait.
Boom. You
There
can
we
see
go.
me, right? You got me?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, here we are. So this is, of course, coming from Netflix, Jupiter's Legacy. This is the comic. This is the show based on Mark Millar's story. So I gotta say, I read the original story. I read the first one.
Mhm.
It kind of came and went for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience with it. I read it in college. And like it was fine enough, but it didn't leave a super big impression on me.
Yeah, I felt the same. This trailer though, I really enjoy it. I really like it. I think it's got a solid cast. Those that I'm aware of, the actors I'm aware of, it has a solid cast. I
Yeah.
feel like it's staying true to what that story was, but it's presenting it in a way that's actually visually arresting.
The
Looks cool.
visuals are crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like even the colors on the costume look
Yes.
just otherworldly.
Yeah, totally. That was the thing that kind of struck a chord with me, I think, with the trailer was just that, like, I don't know, not to say that, like, the Netflix shows look bad, but I think some of the more high concept Netflix shows, it's like, you kind of have that question of, like, well, which one am I getting? You know, like, what degree of budget are we putting behind this?
Yeah.
sure.
And this seems like the right level. You know, like it
So-
seems
Go ahead.
like it seems like it's got that, you know, network drama, like higher kind of production value to it.
So it's important to mention that this is a product of the relationship between Millar World and Netflix,
Right.
right? So, Millar World was folded into Netflix pretty much, and I think this is the first project we got out of that relationship. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Did they not do that magic one?
Hasn't come out yet.
No, yeah, they talked about that. I feel like there was maybe like a movie or something small, but I think this is the first like big, you know, Netflix series like event kind of title thing.
Yeah, and so I say that to say also that maybe the reason it has a higher production value is because they have greater skin in the game.
Yeah, right.
Well, and you have to imagine they're hoping to cash in on their own superhero thing as
Yeah.
well.
Totally.
Oh yeah, this is super cool. You pointed out the visuals. I gotta say that these costumes, these are some of the best looking costumes I've ever seen in a superhero property.
They look really good.
Especially ones that aren't like they look real, but they don't look overly real, like some of like the MCU stuff. You
They
know?
also don't look goofy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like I feel like some of the MCU stuff sometimes goes the opposite direction where it's like it's so or like Shazam was kind of like that. Where like it looks good but it very much looks fake. Like it looks like CGI, not something a person would actually wear. And I do like that about this as well.
Yeah. I'm really excited for this. I would love for this to be a success because getting more would be really cool. There was an awesome conversation that took place in the Discord actually about Millar's intent, and Viltrum Warrior was very good at breaking down like what he was going for throughout this series. And so I would love to see this play out. I would love to see them really get the time to tell their story. This gives me like a very much like a Watchmen type of feel to it, where it has the legacy aspect, but then also the new characters in it as well. So I say that, and flashing on the screen is the phrase "no legacy." So there you go, lives forever. No legacy lives forever. Yeah. I love this. I think this is going to be really cool, and I'm here for it.
I think it's something that like you gotta imagine what Kale laid out to, like the whole superhero thing. Like Netflix has got to be sweating right now. Like, obviously, since the Marvel deal kind of ended, like, they haven't really had, you know, they've done a couple comic book adaptations, but they haven't really had, like, their big superhero show. And, like, every big network has their big superhero show right now. So you got to imagine they're looking across the fence like, oh, yeah, us too.
Yeah. Yep. And they did the Old Guard, which was I believe it was a success. And then they did the Rick Remender one, which didn't get over. But they need an overwhelming success.
Yeah, because like Umbrella Academy was like pretty popular, but it wasn't it didn't fucking explode. But wait, the Rick Remender, you mean Deadly Class?
No.
Oh, I was gonna say, because wasn't that like Showtime or something? That
was sci-fi.
That was sci-fi.
Yeah,
but I think the Remender was the last days of the American Crime. Something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yep. But yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for Netflix. I think it's cool for Mark to get his work on a grander scale. I mean, he's had the movies and stuff, but like, you know, to be recognized for this as his baby, his thing with Netflix, I think it's a great opportunity. Yeah, May 7th.
Yeah, we'll see how it is.
Yeah. We will most likely be reviewing it. So
stay tuned.
We'll be watching it.
Exactly. And we're back. Okay. Whew,
you do the whole show stuck that way.
I was nervous for a moment. I thought I was going to have to. So I want to follow up on the March Madness tournament that DC put together, the round robin situation from last week. Last week we spoke about it. We broke down the brackets and we talked about what we thought would win each one, and you know, kind of why we didn't think this was the best idea for DC to be putting some of these concepts against each other that people would really enjoy and would be upset if they didn't get over. So that's actually exactly what happened.
You mean we predicted the future?
Yeah, you know, every now and then we were able to successfully predict what is to come. So let's actually go over the results from round one first. So Green Lantern's Underworld on Fire beat out Etta Candy Holiday Hero Inc. to the surprise of no one.
What?
Yeah, that feels like a gimme. Zatanna and the King of Nightmares beat out the Brave and the Bug Crisis on Infinite Ambush.
Bummer.
No!
That's a shame.
Rest in peace, Ambush Bug.
Similarly feels like a gimme.
Yeah.
Zatanna's pretty big. Ambush Bug is not.
Not yet. Wait till Ram gets a hand on him.
Yo.
The Son of the Creeper was taken down by Lobo and Animal Man Scorched Earth.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. The Creeper, who is that?
It's not even him, it's his fucking son. Yeah. Well, I don't even know who the Creeper is.
Right, that's a good point. You read this book.
You're all a bunch of rookies. Ron V knows who the Creeper is.
Yeah, well, when Ron V's writing the Creeper, then I'll check it out. Until then, I don't give a shit.
Wouldn't it be really funny if that was actually his pitch and we'll never know because they didn't release the creative teams?
Damn, you're right.
You'll never know. I'm going to go have a pint with him on Monday.
Enjoy.
You let us know.
No, you didn't vote for it. You don't get it.
So that's that. The real story, of course, is that Robins beat out Justice League Queer.
Yeah, I mean,
Robins is chill.
Is that the story?
You don't think it is?
We knew that was going to happen.
I mean,
I think we knew it was going to happen, but I still think it's the story.
Yeah, I think it. I think it speaks to what we outlined about it last time, right? Like you had cited a bunch of tweets that you had read, from queer comics fans that were out tweeting about it and kind of like, and that's obviously right. Like you'd imagine that's the target demographic they want to hit with that book, and there was a mixed reaction to the announcement and kind of how it was handled and the name and all these things, that like if you're not speaking to the audience that you're, seemingly trying to court with that book, like it's not a huge surprise that it didn't move on. That's probably for the best. Hopefully they take that feedback and, drive that desire for a book that's fronted by, a queer person or queer people into something that feels a little bit, less, I don't know, tokeny, I guess.
It's what kind of like Rom laid out, where, that's like the first step. DC needed to start with the second and third of how, having them creators tell the stories that they need to, not just be like, hey, cool, this is the name, like,
Yeah,
let's get excited for that. Whereas it should be getting excited for the different idea, the different concept, the what is new and what is unique about this perspective that makes it interesting. And there are stories there, but when it's not positioned that way, it makes it hard to get on board.
Well, that speaks to the fundamental flaw of this entire thing, right? The whole premise of the first round was that you only knew the pitch.
Judge a book literally without its cover.
Yeah, you only knew the pitch, and so that leaves too much room for those kinds of questions. I want to read a little of what the editors had to say about how this all went down. So Andrew Marino, was Andrew Marino one of the ones on yeah, he was. He spoke to it in any event. Andrew Marino spoke to this issue, and so did Michael McAllister. So they had this to say about Justice League Queer. We're thrilled with the fan response, and thanks for voicing these important questions. We didn't anticipate that some fans would see JLQ's inclusion in DC Round Robin as controversial, nor was it our intention to ask fans to rally votes for queer representation in comics. DC currently publishes LGBTQIA+ characters and storylines in comics like Batman, Harley Quinn, Suicide Squad, Far Sector, Wonder Woman, Action Comics, and more. For JLQ specifically, the volume of votes and the personal notes that have been shared online all send a great message that fans want to see a pitch like JLQ succeed. So stay tuned for news about where you might see JLQ appear in the future. We're listening. We'll continue to keep pushing for positive representation across all our projects. Okay, so I do not want to put out there that they intended what ended up happening. I don't feel that way. And, I think that you can make a mistake and it not be what you wanted. That said, I'm a little confused as to how they didn't think that they were asking fans to rally votes for queer representation in comics.
Yeah, and I kind of, I mean, I don't know. Maybe like you said, right? Genuine mistake, and you didn't expect it to be controversial, but I feel like you should have, because, right? Because then that is what you're doing. You're basically being like, oh, do you want a book about like a Justice League team that is made up of queer people? Yes, great. Then come participate in our Twitter vote and rally people behind the book that you want, rather than saying we believe in this as an idea, so here's the team and we're going to make this book, That is what you're doing. You're being like, oh, well, if you wanted it, should have stumped for it. That's shitty.
I don't know, because I think we made the comment that this was around engagement, and one of the things that we saw was this bracket in particular had like 3x the number of votes as all the other ones, right? So that notwithstanding, if the expectation wasn't that around these other books that they weren't going to enable people to rally behind it, I don't know that it's necessarily because this one was JOQ was going to have that same effect. I think it was like a question to engage this community, and had it been a matter of seeing similar numbers of votes compared to the Zatanna book or the Swamp Thing book or etc., I don't think that would have this. I don't think we'd make the same argument, but I think that was the expectation on the editor end, because I feel like that's how, from a marketing perspective, that's how I would think about it. Is, well, we're just trying to get people to engage. We're not looking necessarily for, like, if they retweet and they ask people to, fine, but we're not asking for more beyond that.
So that's where there's a problem with the cross section between big business and social interests. So you just perfectly outlined, almost assuredly, exactly what they were thinking, but that's the problem. You can do that with a book called, I don't know, Pause Off, because no one gives a shit about that, right? Like, if Pause Off doesn't get over, then it doesn't hurt anyone. But when you have an industry where representation's a problem, just leaving it up to a vote where you can reasonably surmise that people will not only vote because they need that representation and it's painful for them that it isn't present, but that they'll also vote because they don't want that representation and they're douchebags on the other end.
Yeah.
That's the scenario that was created by that marketing idea you just outlined. That's why you can't do things like this. That's exactly why.
And I don't think it's, I agree with Sean where, like, I'm not going to put that on anybody, but that's also a tactic, right? Like, outrage marketing is a thing. People know about that. You should have known that this was a possibility, at least, you know? And so I'm not necessarily, like, trying to ascribe malicious intent, but I do feel like somebody at this level of marketing at a company with the status and resources of DC, like, there should have been someone in the room who was like, maybe that's not the idea. You know, like, maybe that won't go over the way we think. And I think that speaks to a broader conversation about representation behind the scenes that we don't always talk about, right? Where it's like, there probably wasn't a queer person in that decision-making room, so you step on this rake. So I don't know.
Yeah. I really wish they hadn't done this. I've looked at Twitter since the results came out, and it's predictable. People were very upset. And there's a certain group that's taking it as a win. It seems like we'll probably ultimately get the book anyways because they recognize that they stepped in something bad.
Yeah.
And that's cool, I guess. But the road to get to the book itself should never have been this arduous for the people who need this book. I personally don't even think the book should exist the way that it's being outlined, but that's fine because it's not for me. If you need this book and you're willing to accept it, warts and all, right? This hurts. So I'm hopeful that the end result is better than what I think it is, and that it's better than the name, because the name's bad too. I really, really hope for comics that this works out. Yeah. Because now DC has a gun to their head. They have to publish this book. There's no way. There's no other way.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, to your point, like, the fact that this happened the way that it did, we'll get a better end product than we would have gotten. That would have felt like...
See, I don't know. I think they'll fart something out just to, just to say they did it and nobody bought it. So why would they do it again?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I think that projects a malicious intent that I don't know is there, because I think even like when you're talking about DC's a business, right? Like, this is a capitalistic society. They're trying to make money. You don't want to put out a book that sucks, and makes no money. You want to put out a book that, oh yeah, great, like we can sell this and make a ton of money and get social clout because we did this and it's good. You know?
I don't know.
It's hard to say. It'll be interesting to see how DC handles this going forward. But even in the so I've got a Bleeding Cool article in front of me, which is just the editors answering questions about this process, and there are more questions about this issue than anything. And it's pretty clear that there's some hurt feelings, and that sucks. And the editors were forced to confront that by answering to this. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think DC stepped in at this time. I do want to quickly go through the rest of the results because we do care about the totality of this deal. So Jesse Quick Control was too quick for pause off the Justice League.
What?
Yes,
Oh, wait.
Indeed.
Jesse Quick made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes. Good.
She was too quick. She ran right past those pets.
Yeah.
Indeed. Blue Beetle graduated to the next round with Blue Beetle Graduation Day, beating out Night Runner Love in Paris.
That's a shame.
Sorry
That is a
to, yeah.
Literally only me.
No, you sold me.
Yeah, I'm literally the only person that wanted that book.
I think Brian Edward Hill probably voted for that.
All right.
Yeah, he
Good
loves,
company at least.
There you go.
He loves that.
Marco is devastated because Swamp Thing, A House of Secrets, got beat out by Suicide Squad 7.
Boo.
Here's the thing, right? So I don't know if you guys have heard, but we're actually starting a petition for a recount because somebody on the DC end fucked up again. And
Hanging Chads.
Leave it to DC. And then last but not least, Superman and Lois Ignition defeated the last Amazon Asteria in the final slot to move forward. So now, because of that, we actually do know a bit more about all of these different projects. We know the creative teams now. Do you guys care? Are you into it?
Yeah.
There's a few.
So Green Lantern's Underworld on Fire is going to be written by Sina Grace with art by V. Ken Marion. Wow, I haven't seen that name in a while.
Right?
Yeah, one of our old buddies.
Good for him.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then Zatanna and the King of Nightmares will be written by the Soska sisters. They are so talented. They did a great, they did a really good Black Widow run for Marvel. I want to say a couple years ago.
Never heard of them.
Yeah. And then art by Vanessa Del Rey.
Cool.
And
cool. Okay.
if you like Zatanna, look at this art.
Yeah, it looks
she
good.
look good.
Yeah.
Lobo Animal Man Scorched Earth is going to be written by Heath Corson.
He did Bizarro not that long ago. And he's real big on comedy comics. So that's my impression of this book, is it'll probably be a funny one.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The art's going to be by Scott Hepburn on that. Robbins is being written by Tim Seeley, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
With art by Baldemar Rivas. Blue Beetle Graduation Day is Josh Trujillo with art by Adrian Gutierrez. Jesse
that cover
Quick,
looks super odd.
Yeah, I know.
It looks like a manga.
Yes, yeah. I was gonna call that out. It looks like My Hero Academia.
I was gonna say, how much does he looks like fucking Midoriya?
Yep.
From My Hero.
Yep.
Yeah. Super weird.
I'm about it.
It's cool.
And then we have Jesse Quick Control, which is being written by Stephanie Phillips with art by David LaFuente. Stephanie Phillips is on the rise. She did the Harley Quinn book. Which is good, so
cool.
Yeah.
She was the one that I was shouting out for from A Wave Blue World, Avery. She was writing that. She's also been on a heavy metal book, Tarna, which has been rad. And I just picked up Butcher in Paris. So she's been, she's
heavy
putting out really good
book.
work.
Okay.
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
It was rad.
Superman and Lois Ignition is going to be written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, with art by Vasco Georgiev.
That art very interesting.
Yeah.
Like we've got Lois in this like kind of like almost like Flash Gordon-esque spacesuit and like Superman fighting a giant electric tentacle monster, and it's got that kind of like, you know, turn of the century like old school sci-fi vibe to it, which that's pretty cool. Like that's a good look for Superman.
And then last and maybe least is Suicide Squad 7.
Fuck this. Give me Swamp Thing.
Word.
Written, I mean, they got a movie coming out. Like this was a done deal.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna win this. It's probably gonna win this bracket as well, right? Like,
Hey, Sean, who's got 2 thumbs and doesn't care? Everyone on this podcast.
That's 8 thumbs, but yeah, I'm with you.
Damn.
hey, I didn't subscribe to that. I didn't say that.
Listen. I didn't. I'm not gonna endorse that either.
Yeah.
That was
You want
rude.
Suicide Squad 7 over Swamp Thing?
No, but I don't put me in your camp without my consent. That's rude.
Absolutely. And then that's being written by Rex Ogle with art by Diogenes Nevis. Sorry if I butchered your name. But yeah, those are the creative teams. We'll continue to follow this as it progresses. What are you voting for now? What will you be voting for to go on to the next round?
And why is it Jesse Quick?
You guys want to place bets real quick?
Are we betting on something? Because if not, no.
Okay. I mean, I'll happily bet on something, I guess. I don't know. We'll do it for the next round.
All right. You really want to bet with me? Remember the last time how that worked out for Marco?
I'm not gonna bet the same shit.
You got to make it worth my while. You got to, All
right, you're right.
So
I'll think about
the
it.
voting period for round 2 is April 8th through the 15th. So get your votes in. You got a couple of more days left to do that. So we're gonna move on. We've got a couple of more trailers, a double dose of Marvel trailers, and trailers mean that I, yet again, must share my screen with you all as we watch these trailers here. So here we go. All right, so this is Black Widow. This is like the 75th trailer, I think.
Oh, good. I can take a break. I'm just going to go to the bathroom for this then.
Look, I'm not going to say that I'm not hyped, I guess. Okay, actually, I am going to say that I'm not hyped.
We've already seen all this.
I don't want more trailers. Like, it's over. How many more trailers can you release?
I think it's funny that this trailer is almost entirely flashbacks to other movies because they're like, we don't have any more footage to show you.
Yeah.
You guys remember this character that we killed and wasn't relevant in the first place?
Oh, come on. She wasn't relevant in the first place. That's silly.
Yeah, I don't like that. But she died.
Not my problem.
She died already, like in real time. She died in
3 years ago,
2019, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like a while ago. Sorry, Kill.
Okay. I was gonna say the movie takes place in 2023. Endgame does, right? That part.
Yeah.
Okay.
For us, it's been a while, and
Right.
so
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah. So it feels kind of weird going back to it at this point. They can't help the pandemic. That's not their fault. Judging the trailer by its merits, it looks cool enough. I'm still confused on Taskmaster. My initial theory was that Taskmaster was actually a clone of Black Widow. I'm going to stick to that just because I think that's really cool, but I'm not convinced that that's where this is going at this point. I think it's pretty interesting that we still have yet to see Taskmaster with no mask on.
Yeah.
The character's been fully masked up and clothed in costume every single time we've seen them. But yeah, that's my ongoing theory. As it pertains to what the trailer is showing us, quite frankly, we've seen it all. We kind of get it. She's going back to her roots. This is a story that, of course, takes place before she died. And she's going back to her roots reintroducing herself and introducing to us her family, Red Guardian, Yelena Belova, these different characters, and we're going to dive into why she is who she is. And then, cool, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's frustrating because I definitely am with you, Sean, where like at this point I don't have any excitement left in me, right? Like the idea of a Black Widow movie this late in the game after the character is already dead is something on its face that I wasn't super excited about, like I would have been, like back in phase 2, I was like all about let's get a Black Widow movie, let's get a Black Widow and Hawkeye movie, whatever, right? Like, but now it kind of feels like too little too late. But that isn't to say that I'm like not like that I don't care to see it or that I'm like not at all interested. It's just I'm not, when I think about the MCU and the things that I'm hype about, it's what's coming. Or it's what we're in the middle of right now. It's where the world is today, not a flashback to, a very different point in the history of the world, right? Like the universe has gone through so much growth since this time period. So like having a movie that feels like it's, almost decidedly going to have to be a step backward, I don't know. Like I'm not super jazzed about that, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. And, I think that Sean laid out the theory like ages ago. I don't know if you still stand by it, but that it could be potentially an opportunity to bring her back somehow. And I think if go ahead.
My theory was that Taskmaster is a clone of hers, and the clone will replace her. Yeah.
Right. And I think if that's the case, I would be more interested. If this movie just exists in a vacuum, it's not to say that like the only reason you watch the Marvel stuff is to see how it connects to everything else, but it is also kind of like I know where this goes. So like there's only so much I can get out of it. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything Pete laid out. I'm gonna watch it because we're gonna do a review. Honestly, like I'm no longer interested in this movie.
So, first of all, I do stand by my theory, and it would be weird if this movie was just coming out and like it had no implications whatsoever. That would just be odd because that's atypical for a Marvel movie in general. And so they have to get crafty with how they do that, given that she is no longer alive and this does take place in the past. That being said, if this were a comic book, no one would care. Like no one would say the things that we're saying. So it's interesting that we could readily accept a flashback story in a comic, even if it was an arc, even if it was a mini, whatever it was, we would be cool with that. But as a movie, we're not as receptive.
I think it's because of what the MCU is, right? Like with comics, that to me anyway, right? Like my coming into comics, I've always had this knowledge and this expectation that like time is kind of loose and things move around and that like you can have stories that take place in the past and that it's just about, like Spider-Man Blue, right? Is like a book that came out and it took place in the past. But what it's about is, giving you emotional beats contextualized in a history that you already know, right? But with this, it's kind of like the whole promise of the MCU is that it's a puzzle piece. Or I'm sorry, that it's a puzzle and that each entry is a piece of that puzzle. And that, like, you should walk into a movie, excited knowing that you're going to get, like, a fun action comedy romp, but also that it's going to play into some larger mythos or that, if you're an eagle-eyed viewer, there will be breadcrumbs for you to pull on and, minor characters that you can see evolve in the background and all these things that it rewards you for being a part of the whole experience. And with this, all it can do is, again, unless your theory is correct or some subsection of it is, right, and there is something here that moves forward, all it can do is fill in blanks. And then I think you run into prequel territory, right? And like comics, like comic arcs that take place in the past, don't really feel like prequels because like the canon of a character is less set in stone and it can always be changed. Whereas like this Natasha, this Black Widow, we know who she is. We know what, a lot of her history. We've watched her grow and change from Iron Man 2 to Endgame. And she's a very different character at the end of Endgame. So like, what is this really going to give us that we don't already have, or that's going to enrich a character that we can't move forward with?
The correct answer, Pete, is I don't care for Black Widow in the movies or the comics, so I'm not going to read it or watch. But if we review it, I'm there.
Whatever, Marco.
So
like you don't
dismissive.
see every one of these goddamn movies. You're such a fake fan. Like you genuinely love the MCU.
Well, let's move on to the future of the MCU by talking about a character who's going to be moving around in time a lot. We're talking about the Loki trailer that dropped this week. Loki is a show that I think a lot of people initially were down on the idea of, similar to Black Widow. He's kind of run his course and done his thing, and that's about it. The closer we get to its release, the more we know, the more we understand that there's a lot here.
Yeah.
I don't even think we needed another trailer, quite frankly. I think they said it all in the first one. But this trailer does add more wrinkles that make this show more tantalizing.
I agree. This trailer was the first time that I got in on this show. I definitely was one of those people, like you mentioned, who just kind of, it's like, do I need more Loki? Do I need more Tom Hiddleston's Loki? And especially knowing that he's like this version of Loki, right, is a character that is getting reset, right? All that growth, all that emotional beats that we went through, we're kind of resetting back to 2012, which originally was something that I really was turned off by. But seeing this and seeing the directions he's going in, the fact that Tom Hiddleston seems to really be having fun with the character still, and also I think it addresses one of the kind of complaints that we've levied at the MCU in the past, which is that because a lot of the villains are one-offs, like they don't get to have legacy, like they don't get to grow and change in the way that the heroes do. And like, as much as I am kind of disappointed to see Loki snap back, you can think about the implications for like where he's going to go from here, and what's it like when Thor comes face to face with him for the first time again, or any of the other Avengers, whatever.
Yeah.
Those things all make the world feel more rich, and that that does kind of entice my interest. It gets my my appetite whetted for it.
I think especially too after Falcon and Winter Soldier, I am pretty willing to give these series a second chance, or at least a second look. A fair chance, yeah, is a even better because I think going into WandaVision, everybody thought, oh yeah, that's cool, a novel idea, but then I think unless you were a real fan of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you probably went in thinking, oh, this is going to be another Captain America story, whatever, and it's turned out to be so far pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And WandaVision hit. So I gotta try.
The sci-fi angle for this was probably the piece that got me the most, like time travel, just like the content of it. I think in this trailer definitely solidified as just being like, okay, this is going to be a fun watch, and I think that's what I want from a weekly series.
Yeah.
With heavy implications for the future of the MCU. I think this show will probably give us the best idea of where things are going of anything that we've seen so far.
It's interesting because presumably this is also gonna cross over with Doctor Strange and with the stuff from WandaVision. So like, I wonder even how some of the other shows coming down the line are going to continue with that pattern, because it looks like that's been like it's been mostly relegated to the movies, and now whatchamacallit, Black Widow is going to be somewhat assumingly integrated into that, but everything's like pretty much the linchpin there is that Doctor Strange movie, which is cool.
I'm still of the mind that this show will introduce Kang. That's what I'm hanging my hat on.
I think that makes a ton of sense. So I when this came out, I actually watched it like twice because like Sean said, there's a lot of Easter eggs in the background, and I took some notes on some things I wanted to call out. Sean, could you actually just start it over?
You got it.
There's a couple things I wanted to just point to.
Oh, the tiles.
So it's great tile work, yeah. But yeah, so the trailer, obviously, right, like we know that there's the whole, they show the split timelines and everything, and they're kind of engaging Loki to help. But it shows him actually going through multiple timelines, like just in the trailer. Like there's the big fight that's coming up in a minute here, and you can see he's in New York, probably seemingly post-Avengers, and New York City's destroyed. You can see Stark, Avengers Tower in the background, and it's all fucked up. And I think that's coming up right after this one. But then there's also a shot a little bit later where it appears to show him on like what looks like Vormir, and I'm thinking it's probably a fake out with Black Widow, but it could be. So yeah, I think it's probably right after this where they're explaining this, and then yeah, they show him. Oh yeah, could you blade ahead a little bit? Because we get this right there. You can see in the back that Stark Tower.
Wait, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right there. That's the Avengers Tower. So you could see this is like potentially post Chitauri. Like I don't know who's to say.
That doesn't look like what actually happened, though.
No. So like my question is that the result of them going and taking the Infinity Stones, and like that fucks some stuff up. You can see here there's like the purple, and like the Vormir call out is like right after this. But he's sitting with like a woman with red hair, and it looks like it might be Nat. So yeah, I don't know. There's a few little interesting kind of like nods there, and then also there's a part where they show the Roxxon logo as well, and we haven't seen Roxxon in a while.
Roxcart is the space that they're like invading or infiltrating their base. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think we've seen them since Iron Man 3. I might be wrong, but
not to my knowledge, we haven't.
Yeah, so lots of little things in the background that seem to be kind of nodding to the past, and I guess maybe what's to come.
Yes. Cool trailer. I'm excited for the show. Not excited for Falcon Winter Soldier to end, but excited to see what else they have coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Which is cool.
So, yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just cool because we were so lukewarm about it. I'm glad to be excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into Marvel's announcement that there are 3 new X-Men titles coming, if you can believe that.
I can.
Yeah, I can.
I can too. So we know about Way of X, that's dropping this month. We know about X Corp, which is dropping in May. We know about Hellfire Gala, that's coming in June.
So excited.
This is where things get a little crazy. In July, we have X-Men #1, written by Jerry Duggan, with art by Pepe Larraz. So what that means is X-Men is being relaunched with a new #1 that will not feature head honcho, head of X, Jonathan Hickman, as the writer.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, I guess it makes sense, though, because you have to imagine that this X-Men is going to be about
The team.
right?
Sure. Okay.
So whatever
superheroes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that whatever, however you want to classify what's been going on in X-Men right now will probably just evolve to another book or maybe a few books. Who's to say?
That's interesting. I think I'd like that better because I definitely want. This is the first ongoing I've ever read Hickman on, and I think I definitely want him to continue to write an ongoing that deals with the same sort of things that he has been dealing, because I think he's been a super interesting writer. I've not read much from him, and this has been enough where like I'm becoming a fan, and I want him to continue the story that he's been telling, and I don't want it to be interrupted by something that they're doing that's like a little bit larger, because I think what he's doing is touching on so many aspects of the X-Men universe right now that it makes sense that we're getting all of these other split titles. Super looking forward to Way of X. I think we talked about how it's going to be like dealing more about the life of the citizens and denizens of Krakoa. X Corp is going to be rad. And I mean, if they're splitting out the more normal, quote unquote, X-Men stuff, the team fighting a baddie, that kind of situation, I don't mind that, but I definitely just want Hickman to be on something.
Well,
yeah,
we know that Leah Williams and Valerio Schiti will be teaming up for a new #1 in August, but we don't know what it is. It's classified. And then, of course, we know that Jonathan Hickman will be teaming up with Redacted, who is the hottest artist in comics right now, for also a new #1 coming in September.
So
God, what if it's John Romita Jr.? No.
Ooh, okay.
On the Moira book.
Oh, no.
No. Okay, hold on. So I do want to throw out a theory based on this image, and I want you guys to tell me if you think it has any if it holds any water. So we have the two books that are classified, right? But the one you can see that there's a logo and it's covered with a classified stamp. The other one is a circle with a question mark. The only other circle is the Hellfire Gala logo. Do you think that that's just because it's a circular logo, or is it maybe an event?
I mean, the X book is circular too, no?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
X-Men, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair point.
I don't know what this is going to be. I mean, I know that there was an intent to do a Moira book, but they weren't able to get the writer they wanted. So maybe Hickman is pulling a Thanos and just saying, guess I got to do everything myself. Or this is going to be a book that deals more with the political, larger elements of the X world, of what's going on with Krakoa, maybe what's going on with Arakko. And he's going to leave the smaller scale biz to, Duggan and Williams and people like that. It's interesting. But the reason why I really wanted to talk about this was to do a temperature check. So we are just a little bit away from Hellfire Gala's beginning. And it feels like we've been in a bit of a limbo state with the X books thus far.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a ton of forward momentum post 10 of Swords. The X-Men title proper has not really dealt in a significant way with the fallout of that at all. And for my money, neither have the other books, not materially.
Yeah.
So how do you guys feel about the state of X right now? Are you still really pumped for what's to come? And what do you need to see to get you back on the high that you were on if you're not there?
It's definitely cooled for me. I'm not interested anymore. I'm not out, but I think that what drew us in the beginning, right, with House and Powers was that House and Powers was immediately fresh. It was gripping, and it moved very quickly. And it didn't always, you know, it wasn't A, B, C quickly plot. It was a lot of like, here's a thread. We're going to chew on this for a while. But like something was always happening and something exciting and interesting was always happening. And it's felt like ever since the preamble to you know, Swords, we've been kind of circling the drain. And it was like all the books needed to drop what they were doing and focus in to be like 10 of Swords. We're doing 10 of Swords now. And then now it feels like we're kind of, you know, expanding back out. But, you know, whether it's because of COVID delays or what have you, right? Like, it's not quick. And the pace when we got to the monthly, like there's multiple titles, it immediately slowed. And I can stomach that a bit to be like, okay, it's monthly. We are going to be moving at a slower pace now that there's more of a status quo. Fine. But stuff's got to happen every issue. Like, you got to give me more carrot and less stick right now, because I feel like I'm investing a lot of time and thought because I'm interested, but I don't, you know, I feel like it's the last 3-4 months we've been like, oh, maybe this will be the issue where it gets back on track. And like, I think X-Men has. The last 2 issues were really interesting and good. But even that, right? That's pulling on an old ass thread rather than dealing materially with what's just happened. Like, we've still not addressed this major shift in the culture of Krakoa, or what should be a major shift, right? But it isn't. And that feels frustrating because I read 10 of Swords what feels like a year ago, even though it was only a couple months in the grand scheme of things.
The only X books that I've been following have been X-Men and Wolverine, and I think Wolverine has had its own, you know, story. He's kind of doing his own thing, so I haven't minded that, or at least I haven't felt it in the same way.
Sure.
Marauders, whenever we do the reviews, I feel like since issue 1 they've been in Madripoor, so that for me has felt like no traction at all. And X-Men, I like what Hickman's been doing. Agreed with Pete. The last 2 issues have been really cool. And I don't mind that he's coming back to a different thread, because I think the concern that we have is being addressed in this very like image. And because of that, I don't mind, because I know that there's something coming down the pipe. Yeah. Whereas if this stuff doesn't address those concerns or the way that we think they might, I mean, we've gotten the previews and we've gotten details, so assuredly they are. But if they don't do it in the same sort of way, I think from there that becomes a conversation on like execution. But as of right now, I'm still excited. I still think that it hasn't addressed everything right after X of Swords, but I didn't have any issue with that.
How about you, Kale?
Yeah, I feel very similarly, and I don't feel like I need to repeat any of it necessarily. I'm more excited about the things that are coming, you know, because I think stuff like Way of X is gonna, you know, try and tackle things that, you know, like Nightcrawler's religion.
Oh,
you know, that's an aspect of Krakoa that I'm really excited about, as well as, you know, the Hellfire Gala. But yeah, like you say, everything's been floundering, it feels like. And, you know, I love the setting. I love the place that the X-Men have made and have been refreshed in Marvel at the moment. But post 10 of Swords, that has ground to a halt. And it needs something to kind of bring it back and make it still feel fresh.
Yeah, it feels like it needs a shot in the arm,
because it's still new.
Yeah,
like it shouldn't feel this way.
And I think that's the thing, is it doesn't feel stale. Like it's like you said, it's not the setting, it's not where the X-Men are at. That's the problem. It's that like they're not doing anything with the momentum that they built.
Yeah.
So I'm at a place that I think every comic book fan who reads the big 2 will inevitably get to. It's the comics fans' crossroads. And what I mean by that is I simultaneously desperately want them to get to the point, but I don't want the status quo to change. So getting to the point would mean introducing Moira, reintroducing her. And in my mind, once that happens, we're in the end game, right? Like that's kind of where, all right, how are we dealing with this? Because that secret gets out and that's it. You know, that's the whole House of Cards. And I want to see that take place. But I also don't want Hickman's vision for the X-Men to stop. I don't want them to go back to living in the mansion in, you know, Westchester or whatever. I don't want them to do any of that, you know? So I'm stuck and I don't know how to feel. And I know that at some point this will end. It's the nature of comics, but I don't want that to happen. And I just wish they had meatier things to serve up on a more regular basis. That doesn't mean the end. It feels like all of the work that Hickman did, which was, you know, incredible stuff during the House of Powers era to build this up, this sandbox, was just to say, okay, here's your sandbox. And now let's live in it for 2 years and not really like do anything with it.
Yeah.
And that's my problem.
And it's frustrating because like I definitely see what you're saying in terms of like we don't want to accelerate to the end game too soon because what's here is interesting and fresh, but like it's also like, you know, like okay, like the vote for the X-Men, right? Fresh, interesting idea. That happened like like last summer or whatever. Now probably not even, but it feels like it was fucking forever ago that they were like, we need to reform the X-Men, and I remember being like, oh shit.
The vote was like
that was only a couple months ago. Whatever.
Yeah, it was this year.
Yeah.
It speaks to the fact that I'm getting fatigued, because it's like that's interesting. Let's do it. Don't tell me about it and then make me wait 4 months and then like. Maybe a thing happens and then it's over, right? Like, and I feel like that's what we're doing a lot of, like the elevator pitches of the stories that the ongoings that we currently have were way more interesting than the stories themselves, and that's frustrating.
It's also weird that the thing that I'm supposed to be excited about, the thing that the books are, you know, working towards, is a gala. Like it's a dinner, it's a get together. You know, we just had that in Ten of Swords, albeit, you know, it was a different premise, but like, did they not sit around and eat and fraternize and get dressed up and whatever else? Like, we just did that. So it's like, I'm excited for Hellfire Gala. Don't get me wrong. It just, again, it feels very much like playing the hits.
Yeah.
In an era that's supposed to be about doing things fresh.
Especially when there's so many things you haven't touched on, really. Like,
yeah,
like why haven't the X-Men like materially come into conflict with the broader superhero community? Like, why are we not like privy to what, like, you know, like what does S.H.I.E.L.D. think about this? You know, like all of those kinds of things where you're like, yeah, like this is the Marvel universe. You have these pieces. Why aren't you leveraging like any of them? You know. I don't want all of that. I don't want fucking X-Men versus Avengers again. But like,
I do.
in the way that like they brushed up against the Fantastic Four, and you're like, oh, yeah. Conflict. Like, there should be more of that. And it's weird that there isn't.
It's sorry. I mean, I don't know. I don't, and maybe this is just because like I don't read Big Two, and in this way I've not read a run like this. It's always been after the fact, once things have unfurled. So I'm loving the fact that we're just living in it. I don't care to see the end yet because I'm having fun with where we're at, even like 2 years in. I don't need to know the end. I don't need to necessarily know when Moira is going to come into play, just because there's a lot still left to do, and I don't mind that they're taking their time.
I just wish it felt meatier. Like, I don't mind if something's slow. It's when it's slow for like seemingly no reason that I get frustrated. Because like, I don't mind an issue where characters are like sitting talking the whole time. If at the end I walk away being like, I understand you better, right? Or I got something out of this. Like the last 2 issues, there's a lot of exposition, but it's good exposition. And like it's good storytelling, it's good character development. And a lot of it has not been that.
I'm actually really happy to hear that, Marco, that you're at that place with this, because that's pretty cool. You know, this is your first foray into the monthly comic thing as a, you know, in terms of being in the sandbox versus something that's like a mini like Rorschach or even Strange Adventures. I'm glad to hear that. That being said, I do wish I could feel that level of patience. For me, you know, I'm picking up a lot of these books, and slowly they're losing me, because each one of them seems to be in a similar holding pattern in which a little bit of something is going on, but it's mostly not anything. You know, like what is the overarching storyline of X-Men, right? Of that title itself. What is the overarching storyline of Marauders? You know, like the overarching storyline of Marauders is the same storyline essentially that it has been the whole time, and nothing really has happened in that book.
And what bothers me is like, it's, again, if it was like nothing, like if you couldn't boil it down to like interesting bullet points, but there was like good character beats and good action throughout, it'd be like, all right, well, this is like a fun comic. But it's not even really giving me that. Like, you can think of all of like the, you know, like there's been moments, right? Like, oh, like they go and get tattoos, and like that was a moment, right? And like, you know, the stuff that happens with Shaw, like that's a moment. But like, there's a bunch of issues in the middle where it's like, aren't they supposed to be like out saving mutants? And like they kind of did like once or twice, but like it doesn't really, that's not really what the book was about. And that was what it was supposed to be about. And it's not. And like, I love Kitty. I love Iceman. I love Storm. Like, these are some of my favorite X-Men. If it was just them out doing that and saving people, and, you know, maybe they meet a new mutant, or they find this underground slave market where they're selling mutants. I don't know. Like, I'm not the writer. I shouldn't have to tell you. But, like, come up with a thing for interesting characters to go do and bounce off of each other. Like, there's a fun comic in there. But it feels like we just go to the big moments, and then we go back to the holding pattern until it's time for them to do something again.
The last point for me on this subject is, you know, I really love what Hickman has set up. I'm excited for it. I'm into it. And there's a lot of awesome stuff here at the table. Maybe I'm too anxious for it, and I could get with that. I really, really wish there were less titles and more focus. And that's, I think, where I come at it from. Like, you know, no disrespect to the creators themselves, but do we really need the Children of the Atom book? You know, is that something that has to exist? It feels like excess. And there's a lot of this that feels for me like excess. And every single book has done something that I'm like, man, if that was the focus right now, this would be crazy. But they don't focus. And so that's just kind of where I'm coming from. But ultimately, you know, if we're doing a temperature check, my answer is I'm still all in. I will never not be all in because of the nature of what this is and who I am. But I do have some concerns and some level of trepidation. I'm hopeful that Hellfire Gala is going to be that thing that takes us to the next stage of this story. But if you are enjoying the X stuff, or you're off the boat, you're off the reservation, as it were, let us know. We generally have seen in our Discord server mixed feelings. I know some people who are really into it still, and some who are kind of falling off. So where do you lie on that. Are you excited for the Hellfire Gala? Write in. Let us know your thoughts. Hit us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. While you're thinking about us still, go ahead and follow us on your podcast hosting platform of choice. Make sure that you're leaving us a rating and a review, whether it's on that platform or it's on YouTube. Wherever you get us, there's a way to show your support for this podcast, and we are so appreciative. Once again, thank you for writing in with your questions. For Ram, we always appreciate the interaction, whether it's on the podcast or Discord, wherever it is. We see you guys, the YouTube comments on the Geiger review that we put out. The support there has been awesome. The support on We Watch has been great. We are really, really thankful. So keep it up. We've got book clubs on deck for you guys. The Invincible one is out now. We've done a ton of different ones. So check that out. Next week, we're going to tell you guys on this podcast what our next book club will be. We think you'll be excited. So at the start of the episode, when I let you guys know about everything else, we'll talk about that. And yeah, there's lots going on in the Pals network, as it were. So thank you for being a part of the ride. We really appreciate it. Pete, let's get into the plugs.
Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the Comics Pals. If you want to connect with me on social media, I'm at @loud_Pete on Twitter and Instagram. Come chat with me about whatever you're checking out these days. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you playing? Let me know. I'm kind of drowning in media right now, so I don't necessarily need a ton of recommendations. So if you do hit me with one, make sure it's the S tier stuff. All right. If you want to get some more content from me, you can check out the Potscast. It's the weekly Nintendo podcast I host over on lootpots.com. Streaming over there on Thursday nights, twitch.tv/lootpots. And then, of course, you can check out my band, Long Friend Time Friends debut album, If Me Dies, wherever you get your music. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Awesome. Kill.
You can find me at Toto Into. That's TOTOINTOW. You can find my work at killward.com. That's CALEWARD.com. You can find Phil at Cyborg Bebop. That's CYBORGBEBOP.
Nice.
Damn.
It's so long every time. You can find me at Mr. Marco Anamoto on Instagram and Twitter. You will see me and loving everything Swamp Thing, as you will be familiar with this interview. And come talk to me about The Way of the House Husband. That shit looks mad funny. So I'm super excited.
Good.
Is it?
It's very good. Yeah,
okay.
I'm
super excited to start. That shit looks hilarious. And I'm definitely ready for just like something goofy, lighthearted anime stuff. I've been watching Demon Slayer, and that's a little heavier. Fun, but yeah, man. Come talk to me about that. And then, as always, on the Weeb channel, if you haven't finished Attack on Titan season 4, well, a few people have finished the manga for it, so they're having a whole conversation about it.
And
I might be taking the plunge.
It's all in black bars too, so
yeah, that's
ain't nobody reading nothing in TV Party or Weeb Central.
Yeah. And then, as always, we're also doing an Akira read along. We are on volume 4 this week. We took a slight break just because we had a bunch of reading. So this week, on the release date Monday, for Sunday, we'll be reading volume 4.
There you go.
Awesome. As for me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram only at Sean Soapbox. The only thing I want to plug is this podcast. I'm really happy to be a part of it. We've done a ton of interviews like the one we did with Ram. Go check out his work. I think he said The Right Ram.
Yeah, The Right Ram on Twitter.
On Twitter, go check his work out. And just thank you for the support. With that, we're the Comics Pals signing off. Take care, guys.
See you next week.